Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Simpleton Sermon Podcast, where we're trying to keep things simple but not stupid. I am your host, Pastor JJ. In case you're wondering, I'm just a regular pastor of a smallish church in the suburbs of Flint, Michigan. I just create these sermons for my local congregation, and then I put them together for this podcast because I know people consume Christian content in a lot of different ways. And so I hope these sermons help you grow in your faith and understanding of Jesus, but I always mention every single week, because I am a broken record, that these episodes are not designed to replace your connection to a local church. Please find a healthy local congregation and plug in. And when I say healthy, I don't mean like big or super successful. Healthy churches come in all shapes and sizes. The most important thing in a church is that there are faithful people trying their best to live out their faith in Jesus together. And if you can find that, you have found a rare jewel, and you should hang on to that treasure. Anyways, today we are wrapping up in our series in Joseph. Well, actually, as you know, this sermon series is just the first of 4 sermon series, all about the story of Israel's journey into slavery in Egypt and then back out again. And we're going to be getting to that over the next year or so. So basically, we're going to be alternating back and forth between this story and the book of Acts. So anyways, next week we will be back in the book of Acts. We're going to go back through chapters 5 through 5, 6, 7, 8, which is going to be great. But until then, today we are in the New International Version, so grab your Bibles, because here we go. All right, so I'm going to give you the shotgun, and then I'm going to connect the pieces. First, Edward Murphy Jr., not to be confused with the New York politician Edward Murphy, or the beloved Daddy Daycare actor and the voice of Donkey in Shrek, Eddie. Edward Murphy Jr. was an Air Force pilot who retired. There they are. Who retired from being in the Air Force, and he became an aerospace engineer who worked on rocket acceleration, because that's the coolest job I've ever heard of. And he's best known for his namesake, Murphy's Law. Have you ever heard of Murphy's Law? Vaguely familiar? Basically, it says anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Now, apparently in my research, I found out that Edward did not like that phrase. He always said that it was a misinterpretation of what he actually said, but the name stuck. Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's shotgun pellet number 1. Shotgun pellet number 2. Sun Tzu was a famous Chinese general and strategist. He wrote the book The Art of War back in the 6th century BC, right? 6th century BC. And in his book, he wrote, every battle is won or lost before it is fought. So obviously that's about preparation. Every battle is won or lost before it is fought. Shotgun pellet number 3, the metaphor of the bank account. Gary and Barb Rosberg are popular Christian radio hosts and popular marriage conference speakers, and they introduced this idea years ago called the metaphor of the bank account. And basically it goes like this: in your marriage, but it applies to every relationship, right? Kids or coworkers, friends, whatever. Your connection is like a bank account. And when we serve each other, on the good days, we are making deposits into the bank account. And when we have a bad day or a fight or, we do something wrong or whatever, we make a withdrawal from the bank account of our relationship. Now, you might be asking yourself, what on earth could an aerospace engineer from 70 years ago have to do with an ancient Chinese military general and have to do with some cheesy Christian radio host back from the 90s? And the answer is that it comes straight out of our scripture for today. Today is the final sermon in our series, Dreams of Desolation. We've been traveling along with Joseph in his whirlwind trip down to the depths of Egypt. Now, just to recap, in case you're just joining us on this journey, Joseph has been through the ringer. First, he was this whiny little daddy's boy whose jealous brothers sold him into slavery. Then, while he was in slavery, he did really well, and God was with him, and everything was great until a false accusation landed him in prison. And then, when he was in prison, he did really well, and everybody liked him, and God was with him, and everything was great until some quote-unquote friends got sprung from jail, and then they completely forgot to mention Joseph to Pharaoh. Last week, we ended the chapter with Joseph left behind and forgotten in prison. And that's where we start today. Now, I mentioned this last week. 2 years go by. And Joseph's just hanging out in prison, probably pumping iron in the yarn, getting ripped, and getting some sweet prison tattoos, That never happened. But he's in prison. So meanwhile, in the cushy throne, Pharaoh has this super strange dream. And you might remember, I mentioned this last week also, Egyptian culture felt that sleep brought you really close to the other world where the gods were, right? And so if your dreams were like a way that the gods could speak to you, and so they took dreams very seriously. And you'll see in a second, it's a pretty freaky dream. And so Pharaoh wakes up, he tells his advisors, you guys, I had a dream, and it was crazy. I have to tell you about it. And he explains the dream to them, and then the advisors kind of sit there like, what in the name of Osiris is wrong with this guy? Right? Like, what was he smoking that would give him that dream before he fell asleep? And so they have no idea, and they kind of confer, and they come back to him, and they're like, we got nothing. Right? We have no idea. We cannot explain your dream. And then the cupbearer, remember that guy who forgot Joseph? He has this horrible light bulb moment. He's like, oh no, I forgot that guy. Have you ever done this where you forget to do something like really important? Right? It's like, oh no, I was supposed to drop off that thing, or I was supposed to meet that person, or I was supposed to call someone. Oh no, I left my kid at soccer practice 2 years ago. This is bad, right? I don't know how you recover from this. And so he pipes up in verse 9. Finally, he comes up in verse 9 and he says, and the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker of the house of the captain of the guard. And each of us had a dream that same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant to the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And the things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. So the cupbearer's like, okay, Pharaoh, hey, I know a guy. He does dreams, mention my name, he'll cut you a deal. Go talk to that guy. So they pull Joseph out of prison. They get him all cleaned up, and they send him to Pharaoh. And he comes to Pharaoh in verse 15. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh. But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Now, we just have to pause for a second to appreciate the humility here. Like, Joseph knows it's not me. I am not a dream interpreter. I can't do anything. He gives all credit and all glory to the true source of interpretation, right? He says, this is all God. And then Pharaoh explains his dream in verse 17. And he says, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I have never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. I think it's really nice that Pharaoh has such a body-positive attitude about cows, right? It's just these are fat, nice, fat, healthy cows, and you got the ugly, scrawny cows, Years ago, there was a lady named Kate Moss. I think she's a model or something. I don't really know. And she said, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Have you seen this quote? It's circulated around. When she said it like 10 years ago, she got mocked mercilessly. I mean, she was pretty ripped apart. But one of my favorite responses came from comedian Jim Gaffigan. And he responded, now if you don't know, Jim Gaffigan, he's kind of a bigger guy. And he responded, he said, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. I can think of 1,000 things that taste better than skinny feels. And you know what? He's right. Because you know what skinny feels like? It feels like hunger and grumpy. That's what skinny feels like. And so you got these fat cows that come out of the river, because that's totally normal. And they come up out of the river, And then they're healthy and they're fat and they're probably happy. And then the skinny cows show up. And then in verse 20 it says, the lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. Now, if you've heard this story your whole life, right, you probably just kind of gloss right over that. But let's pause for a moment. The skinny cow eats the fat cow. What? Like how does a cow go about eating another cow? You know, you're like looking at the fat cow and you're like, it's like a burger wrapped in leather with hooves. You know, it just doesn't sound very appetizing to me. And it's easy to see why Pharaoh was so shook. This is a messed up dream. Skinny cows eating fat cows. And then he has another dream. It's almost exactly like it. You got big, healthy grains of wheat and then scrawny, burnt out ones, and the scrawny ones eat the big ones. And I guess I really don't want to see what wheat looks like with teeth. The skinny one eats the fat one. Pharaoh turns to Joseph and he says, nobody can explain this. You gotta help me out. In verse 25, Joseph lays it all out there. He says to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It's one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It's just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land, but 7 years of famine will follow. 7 years of abundance are coming, and that's going to be awesome, right? The fat cows are coming, but then there's 7 years of famine, and that's the skinny cows. Now, it always seems super obvious when you know the interpretation. All right. So if you've heard this story before, you're like, yeah, of course. But Joseph is the full package dream consultant, right? He doesn't just show up and give you the interpretation. He follows it up with some advice. And he says in verse 33, and now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land and take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. So he's like, you've got this abundance coming, so don't waste it, right? Pile up 20% and save it so then you can make it through the tough years. Pick someone to be in charge, get it all organized, and you will be just fine. And Pharaoh kind of looks at him. He says, all right, that's a good idea. You do it. Verse 40 comes around and the Pharaoh says, all right, you are now in charge of everything. And I read that, and all I could think was, what is this, a church committee? A person came up with a really great idea, so they got all the responsibility dumped on them, and then they said, good luck. The whole rest of the chapter is basically just everything he said coming true, right? Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge. He's now the second most powerful person in all of Egypt. He gets married. He has a couple of kids, and then the 7 years of abundance come, and Joseph works really hard through all that time, piling up the surplus, and then the hard years come. And when that famine hits the land, Egypt is basically the only land that has food because they prepared for it. The abundance got them through the scarcity. Now, coming out of this story, there are 2 big things that we see. Number 1, God provides abundance. Yay, right? We can all celebrate at that. God provides abundance, but God also provides scarcity. Yeah. Less of a yay for that one, right? If God is in charge of the whole show, both abundance and scarcity are coming from God. And so what we actually see is that God provides everything you need. The good news is that God provides what we need. It's our job, it's on us to use it wisely. What Joseph is saying is that the good days, the days of abundance, are not for sitting around. Right? Wow, look at all this abundance we've got. Let's sit on our butts and waste it all. And Joseph is here showing us, no. Make use of your abundance. We as a people, we are so good at wasting a season of abundance, right? We got a little extra time. Yeah, let's put our feet up and do nothing. But the truth that is driving our story this morning is that abundance is a responsibility. Abundance is a responsibility. Abundance is provision, and provision is designed to be preparation. God has given you everything you need to do everything you need to do in your life. Let me say that again. God has given you everything you need to do what you need to do in life. God provides the sparks. You just need to set the flames. The good days in life are not for just sitting around and doing nothing. The good days are to prepare us for what's coming tomorrow. Now, there's only one challenge coming out of this week, but it breaks down in a couple of personal levels. If God provides what we need, then we have to steward your provision. Now, if you don't know, steward, that word, it's kind of like babysit, right? Someone gives you something to take care of. Steward your provision. God has given you everything you have in life, so we got to take care of what God has given us. Make good use of your life. Let me give it to you on a couple different levels. Number one, personal finance. Right now, the government is being very generous, right? They're writing checks all over the place. I know a lot of people in my work, I bump into people who are right on the edge of poverty. And some people, their money situation has never been so good. For a lot of people, for the first time in their lives, they're experiencing financial stability. And the temptation is to blow it. Right? Finally, we got a little extra pocket change, so let's eat out every night. Let's buy the $15 designer coffee. Let's go on that vacation we always wanted. But what people don't realize is that this moment is an opportunity. If you budget and you take that surplus and you put it towards some of your goals, build up an emergency fund, and put something into retirement, pay down the principal on your bills, get rid of some debt. If you take advantage of the abundance, you can change your life. Not just right now while the government's in the mood to pay for everything, but you could change the entire family tree. Dave Ramsey talks a lot like that. He says, set up a plan. Don't waste a season of abundance in your personal finance. Because look, you don't have to be a prophet or a dream interpreter or even a financial analyst to know COVID money ain't forever. Right now, there is a lot of financial assistance out there to those in the lowest financial categories. And so I don't know if you realize, nonprofit demand is down right now. And we're bracing ourselves, right? Demand is down because people are getting grocery assistance and rental assistance and healthcare and childcare. There's money for everything. And we're kind of scared. It's kind of batten down the hatches because we know the storm is coming, because when government assistance dries up, and it's about to. The eviction moratorium was just extended a little bit. Extra unemployment's going to go away. There's a lot of this stuff that's going to go away soon, and there's going to be a wave of need, and the poverty numbers are going to spike. We know this, and as a church, we are preparing for it. FCOC, the Flushing Christian Outreach Center, they are preparing for it. All of us, all the nonprofits that we work with, everyone is getting ready because there's a season of abundance right now. And if you're smart, you will use it to prepare for the scarcity that's coming around the corner. If you're enjoying the benefits of COVID government money, please use it wisely. Plan for tomorrow. Steward your provision. So the first level, personal finance. The second level is church finance. In seasons of abundance, we want to steward our money, our provisions well. A couple of years back as a church, we were living almost week to week financially to pay the bills. And if anything big happened to our church, we would have been in a lot of trouble. And so our finance committee set a goal. And we said, we got to build up an emergency fund because we have organizations that are counting on us, right? Mission organizations, partner nonprofits, community groups. We do a lot of stuff in the world, and we want to be able to continue helping people no matter what comes. And so when we had an abundance here or there, we were smart with how we used that money. Here's another example. It has nothing to do with money because I feel like I'm talking about money too much. When COVID dropped last year, do you guys remember this? In like March of last year, we actually shut down the church completely. We closed the building. We went fully digital. And when we did that, we didn't have very many recordings. We were not ready for that, right? And so we were scrambling a little bit, trying to find recordings of prayers and sermons and trying to get music. We didn't have any recordings of the music in this church. And it was like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And so for a while, we were scrambling. But after the initial wave of crazy, and we got all our equipment upgraded and we got everything, in the office, we started piling up recordings. We made an archive of almost every single song we did in both the traditional and the contemporary style. Now, it is my hope and my goal that this church will not ever have to close our doors again. But if something catastrophic happens, we're ready for it, right? I'm never going to pray for scarcity, of course, but as a church, we have used our abundance wisely so that we are ready no matter what the future might throw at us. Abundance is provision, and provision is preparation. So steward your provision. Personal finance, church decisions, and the third final level is steward your provision wisely in your relationships. Do you remember at the beginning of the sermon, I said the bank account metaphor, where we serve one another? When you invest in your relationship, you are depositing into the relationship bank account. And when you fight or you take from one another or you make a mistake, or you didn't pick up your socks for the umpteenth time, or you spent too much money at the store, or you're spending too much time at work, or whatever it is, you are withdrawing from that bank account. And this is not just about marriage. This is all relationships are like this. And some of us have relationships in our lives where we're getting notices from the bank that are saying error, insufficient funds. There's not enough left in the relationship bank account. And so that relationship, whatever it is, the one with your kid, with your coworker, your boss, with a friend, your husband, wife, it's running on empty. And you're living in a season of scarcity. So you got to pile up some cash in the relationship bank account. Invest in that relationship. And you do that with acts of service. Serving the people in your life is how you build relationships. Use moments of abundance to make a healthy deposit into the relationship bank account. Look for opportunities to serve one another. In every area of life, abundance is not an invitation to laziness. Abundance is not an invitation to indulgence. You are given all that this world has to offer, not so you can sit on your butt and do nothing. Abundance is provision. Provision is preparation. Use what you have been given. Get yourself ready for whatever tomorrow might throw at you. What could an aerospace engineer from 70 years ago have to do with an ancient Chinese military general and some cheesy Christian radio hosts from the 90s? All have to do with one another. And the answer is they all understood the importance of preparation. Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Prepare accordingly. Sun Tzu says every battle is won or lost before the fight. Prepare accordingly. Barb and Gary Rosberg says relationships are like a bank account. Prepare accordingly. God told Joseph 7 years of abundance, 7 years of scarcity. Prepare accordingly. And so I'll leave you with this. May God provide you with everything you need to do everything you were meant to do in this life. Prepare accordingly. Amen. And that is a wrap on another sermon series. Thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to smash that follow button, like or subscribe. Please even leave a review if you feel so moved, because that helps other people find this content. We will see you next week with a whole other sermon series and our whole month-long launch of this podcast. But until then, I will be looking forward to the future.